Welcome back to Plain Talk with Mr. Raymond Gaskin. We had a brief discussion last week about the possibility of a hung parliament, which means that no one side gets a majority. Before we get there, however, Raymond, could you tell us who gets the presidency, who names the cabinet?
The presidency goes to the party with the largest amount of votes. That's it. Whether it's 40%, 39, 42, 44, 50, whatever. The largest party gets the presidency.
Largest even by one.
Even by one. And the president names the cabinet. He appoints the cabinet. So that's it.
He gets sworn in
as president
by the chairman,
and he appoints
and
the
then
cabinet.
he then swears in
the cabinet. That is the government.
The parliament, after the list is extracted, because there is a list of names, there are regional, there are 65 seats in the National Assembly. The president, the leaders of the list name
their people
to the National Assembly. Do you know who the leader of the list for the PPP is?
No, I don't. I haven't seen the list. I don't know.
It's very interesting that has not enough is
gazetted. It's been gazetted.
It was not. What is gazetted is the presidential candidate.
It's a requirement. It's a requirement for the leader of the list to be so described, because the recall legislation imposes that obligation on the leader of the list.
Gives that power
to withdraw. So you have to know who is the leader of the list. I think APNO is Ram Sarup.
Yes.
And in
that's
AFC
the party's chairman.
Trotman at AFC. I don't know what the PPP is.
Yes. So you can have a situation, one person has 34% of the votes, two of the other parties, 33 each.
And that's what,
they won with 30.
Theoretically, you could get it.
Yes. Is that what we mean by a hung parliament?
A hung parliament, that's what it means, that no single party controls a majority of the parliament. That's what a hung parliament means in England. So you could have that, where no party controls. As a matter of fact, the opposition parties control more votes than the party of the president. We have that in America now.
Yes.
We have that in the United States now, in the House of Representatives.
In that case, would the majority then, whoever they are, be able to name the speaker?
Oh, yes, the speaker is elected there. Oh, yes. The speaker is elected by the majority. So
okay.
they would have the speaker.
That would be a good test.
Or
the government could
no,
say, look.
it's here. The government can't say no. They elect the speaker.
No, but the government could cut a deal with one of the parties.
Oh, well, I think any government
in a minority
situation who already sees the difficulty of passing legislation would need to bring on board one of the parties, not individuals, because that's prohibited now, one of the parties to give them a working majority in the National Assembly, because without that you wouldn't be able to pass laws or pass the budget. Not only that, under 106 of the Constitution, if the parties in the opposition move a motion of no confidence in you, you have to come out. You're out. 106, I think.
Yes.
If what does it say here?
The cabinet, including the president,
shall resign on a motion of no confidence by the opposition. If the opposition parties have more than you, they can remove the government and the cabinet and the president.
And just for clarification, a vote of no confidence simply requires a simple majority.
Yes. We also have impeachment proceedings here too against the president that requires a vote of half of the people plus one. A simple majority could remove the president by impeachment proceedings here. And then the general confidence vote is...
It's pretty difficult to get it done, though, isn't it, under this...
the impeachment of the president is difficult because it requires a resolution from his own party members. But the National Assembly, if it's controlled by the opposition parties and they have more votes than the ruling party, they can remove the government on a vote of no confidence. That's all. So I'm seeing, and in the
in your
last
view?
polls, the last letter I see from Bisram, I think was published yesterday.
Yesterday. You understood that letter? I'm not quite sure what you...
I understood it clearly what he's saying.
What he was saying, you had to work out the numbers.
We work it out. Well,
because he said something.
I did algebra at Saints, you know.
So you x plus 32.
Yeah. X plus x minus 31 plus x minus 17 is 100. Yeah, so 3x is 148. So x is 49. 49.3 if you do it right. Claude Very used to teach me math.
I saw it.
3x is 148.
Well, unlike you, I don't have such a sharp head.
Yes.
And I went my computer and I started playing around.
I'm glad I don't get my computer yet. If I had my computer, I would have gone to my laptop to get it.
The most you could do in that, the most the PPP could do in that situation is get 49%.
Yeah. Well,
because if it's 50%, then it would mean 103%.
Yeah. But Bisram says that because, and in the last, this is the third letter to Stabrook, where Bisram is writing about his findings. And in this particular letter, he did not give the numbers. He had this mathematical riddle which you had to work out about x minus 31, and which I worked out. And he's saying that in his first letter to Stabrook, he said PPPC had 48. And in his next letter to Stabrook, he said they had 50. And this letter to Stabrook, he says they have about 49. So they ain't gone past 50, even according to Bisram. The PPP, according to Bisram, has not been able to reach over 50.
The PPP has been saying every vote counts. They seem desperate, Raymond, to win these elections.
Well, all the parties want to win.
No, why? The PPP has been going out. I mean, look at some of the things, as you said earlier in this program, what they've been doing. Why do you think they're so keen to get back in power?
Oh, the PPP will have a lot to lose if the others take power and start investigating them. What they've done for the last 19 years. All the corrupt deals, all the lotto money, the flood money, the World Cup money, the deals, the sweetheart deals with their friends, the privatization deals. I'm sure that if the opposition parties were to take power, they would look into those things. The PPP would not be happy with that.
Rupnarayan said the only term they deserve is 5 years in Camp Street.
Well, Rupnarayan has a flair for the language, as you know. He speaks very well. He speaks well.
I'm asking you to comment on it, other than the quality of his prose.
No, I really do believe that if you were to get a new government, and a new government were to conduct an impartial investigation into corruption, and charges were to be laid, I would say let the court deal with it. I would say that. I have no problem with that. But you'll have to bring people from the RCMP or the FBI or Scotland Yard to do it here, because we don't have a police force here that could investigate anything properly. You'll have to bring foreign people to conduct a proper investigation.
Well, you want a forensic audit like what Mr. Robert Prasad wanted at Guy Sukkot.
Well, I don't know about Robert. He said he wanted to he really didn't want it. But we will have to bring in foreign people from the Canadian and the British and American law enforcement to really investigate things.
If a government, suppose a different government comes into power, Raymond.
From which party?
Other than the PPP, whichever. What would you tell them? Some of the immediate things. I know your favorite, Amila, scrap Amila.
Oh yes, Amila I would not support. I'm not supporting Amila from any government. But they won't ask me. They have their own people who advise them. And if they come to ask me, they will have to pay consultancy fees.
No, but,
I don't do work for free.
What would you want to see?
Amila, first of all.
Anything else?
Amila, first of all. I mean, a government other than the PPP?
Yes.
We'll start with Amila.
Marriott?
Marriott, I don't see how the government of Guyana, strapped for cash, with all these deficits, could go and invest in a hotel. I don't see it. All that has to be scrapped.
Do you smell corruption here?
I don't know I don't know about smelling corruption. The whole thing is improper and obscene. It's an obscenity. For the government of Guyana...
Which is a step short of corruption?
Worse than corruption. Because it stinks to high heaven. It stinks that the government could take money and go and invest in a big hotel. This is all nonsense, ridiculous.
What about Jack?
And we don't have enough money for the University of Guyana. Are you going to take money and go and invest in some hotel? This is all nonsense.
What about Jagdio's
His benefits.
The specialist hospital.
Well, his benefits will have to be reviewed. The specialist hospital, I don't know if who going to private people will do it. I don't have a problem if private people do it, but I don't see the government putting money into a tourism hospital. I think it's ridiculous. I think a lot of, and they'll have to review this Chinese deal for 137 million US for the airport. All those things will have to be reviewed every single day.
And the laptop?
And laptop deal has to be reviewed. Laptop, Sandspring, Aurora, the Buck, all have to be reviewed. Every single one. I assume there is corruption in all of it. I would assume that. Somebody making a raise.
What would you do about the...
Not me, the people.
What would you ask to be done about NCN?
NCN, the nasty network, the nasty communication network, NCN has to be, in my opinion, converted into what is called PBS, into a public broadcasting system. Here they don't understand these things. They go to America and get advice from the PBS people in the States how to run a PBS, a public broadcasting system, not a party thing that's run by one party people, like fuzzy people. That has to be addressed. The privatized unit has to be addressed. The entire NISL has to be reorganized from top to bottom. So there's a lot of work to be done here. You need a lot of forensic police here, from the RCMP, the FBI, the DEA, and Scotland Yard. You need at least about 200 people here, at least, to deal with the mess that you got to investigate. You need about 200 people.
Do you think one of the areas that...
And the whole question of the narcotics trade, and the money laundering that's going on in this place, and the tax evasion, you need at least 20 people from the IRS to come down in and run this tax out, because Sattar is not doing it.
But can you honestly expect...
He's X-raying containers. He got some
but can you expect, Mr. Sattar, with the widespread corruption that is taking place, with the cover of politics, can you expect Mr. Sattar to fight that system?
He has a responsibility to collect the taxes.
He does.
And part of that responsibility is to staff the place with professionals to collect the taxes.
What would you do?
He's not doing it.
What would you do about all these big tax evaders?
All of them, you need about 25 officers, I'd say, from the IRS and the British Tax Office to come down here and help you collect the taxes. You need about 25, 30 people.
Would you give an amnesty, or would you put them in jail?
No. You know, amnesty, you have to make the money, you pay your taxes. You make your money, you pay your taxes. If you make money, you pay taxes. The tax law is very clear, Section 5. The taxable income is charged according to Section 5. You pay your taxes. But you need about 30 people. I would take 10 from Canada, 10 from the IRS, and 10 from the British. But 30 tax people to collect the taxes.
What would you do about the audit office?
But you know, I'm not running government. I'm not a candidate.
What a pity.
Yeah, but I'll straighten all these bitches out if I had the opportunity. Absolutely.
Careful about your language. Careful about your language.
The audit office, they need about 20 professional people here to audit the books in this country and every region. We need a lot of people, you know, in the famous piece of Lenin where he said, you cannot, and the auditors and the accountants talk about it all the time over there when I was there. You can never build socialism without accountancy. Without Uchot, Bez Uchot, he said, emotion beats socialism. Without accountancy and auditing and checking the books, you can't build nothing. Lenin said that. I believe that. We need a lot of accountants in this place. At the audit office, at the tax office, all over.
This question that has
I take them from the British and the Canadians. And the Commissioner of Police too, bring one from Canada. And the FBI.
You would bring a foreign commissioner of police?
Absolutely. To straighten this guy in the police force, of course you need.
What would you do with Mr. Henry Green? A loyal,
No. Henry Green has reached his retirement. He has to go. 211 of the Constitution says he has to go. 211, he shall vacate.
Why do you think Jack Dew kept him on?
I don't know. Why Janet and them kept Larry Lewis 10 years long after?
No, I asking you, Raymond.
They'll keep people who are loyal to them, who play in the game. And those military men
Larry Lewis wasn't particularly loyal. Loyal to the PPP?
Yes.
He was also loyal to the PNC,
yes,
wasn't he?
And after government change, he became quite loyal, and Janet pressed hard for him to stay on.
Was it Janet?
Janet, I think Cherry wanted him to go and launch into, and Janet said no, let him stay. And he stayed on a long time. And I'll see the senior officers before Gary Best was made Chief of Staff. A whole set of them were removed. I think 4 of them. The government didn't think they were very loyal. But we need a lot of things that to be cleaned up in this country. After 19 years, there's a lot of cleaning up to be done. But they can't do it.
The issue, before we get there, of course, any possibility of cleaning up, we have to get past Monday.
Yeah, that's correct.
This possibility, one here about
Oh.
vote buying. Vote buying.
Well, the government, the ruling party has been using
Is there any
merit and
merit in that?
substance to this?
Yes.
Yeah, there's vote buying. There's vote buying. The vote buying is done in a more sophisticated, subtle fashion. They don't write a check or give you money in your pocket. Although Sukai was sharing out money in an envelope the other day. Straight set of cash.
Jack does that all the time as well.
Well, I'd call it vote buying. If you do it now, if you had a flood in February and you come on the eve of election to give the money, that would be vote buying. If in February you had given out the flood relief, I would say that's flood relief. But if you come in the week before election to share the flood relief money, I would say that's clear vote buying.
What about the this 8% salary increase?
That's pandering. That's pandering and see if
Is that vote buying?
No, that won't buy you no vote, because in any event the public servants are due for this annual increase. The government did it without negotiation, and on the election year they decided to give it 8 instead of 5, hoping that maybe the hostility, the antagonism would be mitigated somewhat, I guess, because that's a constituency that is not very supportive always of the government.
How important, we hear that vote buying takes place particularly, and you and I are very Georgetown based. We think
in the hinterland community
that it happens in Region 2,
yeah,
with the regional chairman and Region 6.
Yeah.
What's your view about those places?
I think it does take place. I think it happens. When I read from the media that the Nocta was out there shearing out tractors and four-wheel this and boat engine.
And Nocta is himself one of these high-paid consultants.
Yeah,
isn't he?
he's a high paid. He does a lot of work in that area.
He's essentially the party man.
In the interior doing all that kind of work. That happens all the time. They've been spending a lot of money to buy the loyalty or the support of the hinterland communities. The government has spent a lot of money.
Would you call that vote buying?
Yes, clearly.
How important is the Amerindian vote in these elections?
If you go by what the pollsters are saying, it is a very important vote. It is a very important vote, because without the Amerindian vote, I don't think the ruling party could even reach 51 or 52 or 53. They don't have any there for something without the Amerindian vote. It's a very important vote. And then the PPP, the ruling party knows that. PPC knows that. They'll be spending a lot of money in the interior.
Raymond, I want to turn your attention to a letter written by Mr. Clement Lai, an ex-project director of the Electoral Assistance Bureau, and a highly regarded civil society individual. In fact, he was awarded the CCH, and he returned it after the discriminatory behavior by the PPPC.
I spoke to him last week.
He was speaking about the simple way where a presiding officer can, in fact, manipulate the system to take away your vote.
Well, I'm sure Suze Bali read it. I read the letter.
That if he misstamps this thing, what it says, what his letter says, is that before the presiding officer gives you a ballot paper, he has to stamp the back of the ballot paper twice.
I know the back of the back of it.
Yes, once behind the top section for the general election, and once behind the bottom section for the regional election, because they're two, the 40 top up. If your ballot paper is stamped at the front, your ballot will be rejected. If the presiding officer gives you a ballot paper that is not stamped at the top and bottom at the back of the ballot paper, you should return it and insist that you get a properly stamped one. That seems to be an extremely easy way for a voter to be deprived, through no fault of his. A presiding officer who you would expect to be trained and knowledgeable misstamp something, and you're deprived of the validity of your vote.
That may be the law, and theoretically that could happen, but I think on a practical level, with all the party representatives sitting there too and monitoring everything, I don't see it so easy where the presiding officer can take away your vote. There are a lot of people in the polling, in the system there besides the presiding officer, and they have an obligation to see that this thing is done properly. They have an obligation, that's why they're there.
So you don't see, at a practical level, you wouldn't be worried too much.
Not if all the parties there represented are see the demand, stamp the thing properly.
So they must have their 1800, 1900
Yeah,
at
yeah.
each polling
Because
station.
anytime he gives you something and it ain't stamped, one of those people should say, hold on a minute, Mr. Presiding Officer, you didn't stamp the thing. So that's why they're sitting there, to keep an eye on everything. Yes.
Someone came to me to see me yesterday, and he told me, he asked me how his votes are how the votes are counted. I said, well, you know, one of the things we struggled for was counting at the place of poll. He said, oh Lord, because he lives in an area where he doesn't want to vote for a particular party that has a predominant ethnic domination, and he's afraid. What would you say to such a person?
He's afraid
That
to go
if he votes against the party that is expected to get 100%, they would know it is he and his household.
How would they know that?
7 people in his household, 10 people in his household.
But
and 10
only 10 people in that state, only 10 people.
It's a small community, yes. It's a small community.
Oh. Well, if I don't know how this, I would say he's afraid to vote for the party of his choice. I would say, and who would know that he did vote for the other party? I can't. He has to be bold enough and exercise his rights. And I would say so he has to go and vote for the party of his choice. He has to go and vote for the party of his choice.
As we get down towards the end of the program, what would you say is the essential difference, or are the essential differences that confront the voters when they go to the polls Monday, November 28th?
Oh, well, if I were to sum it up in one word, I would say the voters have to decide when they go to the vote, to the polls on Monday, whether you want to continue with the existing order of things, and you're happy with it and you want it to continue.
Characterized by what?
If you're happy with it, and you're happy with how they've performed, you would stay with the ruling party, the PPPC. If you really want to see a change in this country, new people, new faces, new ideas, new programs, and so on, if that's what you want, you'll have to choose from one of the two other parties.
But that's self-evident. What I'm asking you, essentially, in terms of substance.
Essentially, it's continuity or change. That is what it comes down to. You want this present thing to continue?
Present thing meaning?
The present system that we've been having for JAGDO, the PPPC, and all of that. You want it to continue? You stay with them. You fed up with it and you want it to change? You choose one of the other parties. That's what's facing the voter here.
Ramatar says JAGDO is one of the country's greatest national assets.
I wouldn't characterize Mr. JAGDO as one of the country's greatest assets. I wouldn't characterize that. I wouldn't use that characterization. A lot of things have taken place under JAGDO's watch that would bring no credit to him if any proper historian were to sit and write about it. The crime, the narcotics trade, the association with criminal elements and all of that, it would bring no credit to JAGDO if a proper historian were to sit and write about his stewardship.
The last general elections, we had 69.7% voter turnout based on the roll, which was probably slightly inflated. The roll is smaller now. What do you think the turnout is going to be?
I have a view that the campaign is quite intensive, it's quite competitive. These 3 horses are down in the home stretch.
4 horses.
Which is the other horse?
Mr. Peter Prasad.
Peter Prasad. I haven't really been counting him in, you know, because, you know, in horse racing, unless you're A-class horse, you can't in A-class race, thoroughbred race. I'm not really counting him much. But you can say he's in the race. I don't know if he's turned the turn at the Durban Park turn, headed to the home stretch. But this is a hard-fought election. The parties are well-funded. They're doing well. They have a lot of money. They spend a lot of money. They're campaigning hard. And I think the turnout would be a good turnout.
A high turnout would favor whom?
A high turnout. Well, I think the PPP is very good at mobilizing its people, and they will get their people out. A high turnout would favor the non-PPP parties.
I don't favor the non-PPP party.
Because the PPP always get their people out.
You said these elections, based on what has happened, and you've been here, you've been an observer, you've been commentator. If the observers, the international observers, were to describe these elections as free and fair, what would be your reaction?
I would say that the level playing field has not been fair, especially with regard to access to the media, the behavior of the government in vote buying and using the state resources to campaign and so on. But I think the opposition parties have made up some ground for that by spending money to get to the media. They've paid for it, but they have been able to get their message out. I would say that. But the playing field has not been level. But the opposition parties have done a reasonable job of going out there and campaigning hard.
Mr. Raymond Garrison, thank you very much. I hope we see you in the new dispensation come after November 28. Operators and viewers, thank you, good night. May we have a fair and free elections where voters decide on issues rather than personalities, on substance rather than the sums of money that have been spent. Thank you and good night.